Many brands offer a lightweight version of their flagship racing cockpits, and this, the Prime Lite, is GT Omega's lightweight version of the excellent Prime rig. The term lightweight is a bit of a misnomer though, because they're still really substantial and will give you a strong platform so you can drive at your highest potential, just at less cost than a full profile rig, so long as you don't mind some compromises to adjustability and versatility. With GT Omega being present in the UK, Europe, the US, Canada and Australia, this could be a serious choice for a lot of people across the globe, if it does the job well. Sometimes the best way to test something is to start a level above it and see what you lose when you step down. And before now, I've been using a full Prime rig for quite some time, with a Fanatec DD1 and Husingveld sprint pedals, two serious bits of kit that can test the limits of any rig. Swapping the Prime for the less substantial and cheaper Prime Lite will uncover any compromises made in order to cut the budget. Time for the Prime Lite to step on the scales of judgment. Let me summarise it for you super quick, but just before I do, please be aware that GT Omega sent me the Prime Lite for review free of charge. However, I alone am in charge of what I say in my reviews, and as you may know already, I'm not afraid to make the pros and cons very clear and take cost into account. If you do head over to buy, use discount code DannyLee to chip 5% off the order amount on any GT Omega cockpit. If you already have a Prime Lite or something else in its class, share your experiences, good or bad, in the comments so that folks following you can hear them. Thanks again to my channel members. Channel member. Hang in there, buddy. Driving with a Prime Lite feels almost indistinguishable from the full Prime for me. I didn't think I was giving up any noticeable performance or accuracy in my driving. It's very hard to tell between the two in that respect, so if you just want a nice, solid base to drive on, this absolutely does the trick. The finish and quality of the components supplied is really good. There's nothing sloppy or rough about anything you'll find in the box, and they don't skimp on the sundries either. Assembly's on the easy side, at least by profile rig standards. It will still take you a good few hours, but overall there's nothing needlessly complicated. It's a good choice if it's your first one like this. Some of them are monsters. This one's not too bad. Adjustability is fairly good, not as good as the full Prime, but that's to be expected. I'm 6 foot and I could get to about 90% ideal positioning. The pedal tray is the worst part and suffers very limited side to side adjustment. There's no integrated monitor mount for the Prime Lite, not at time of review at least, so you'll be wanting a standalone monitor mount to go with it. The Prime Lite arrives in two boxes, one with all the aluminium sections in, well packaged with bubble wrap protecting them from themselves, and one with the pedal tray, bags of bolts and goodies in, with the big third box being the optional seat, which we'll see later. Laid out, the profile sections look great, all the brackets and assembly furniture are of good quality, and you get all the tools, bolts, nuts, screws and sundries you require in big bags. GT Omega are not shy with the amount of fastenings they supply. I have had a lot left over, so you should not have to raid the man drawer for anything. Instructions are straightforward and I would say undaunting, with around 10 pages in the booklet. Make no mistake, profile rigs like this are complicated if you're not generally used to putting things together, and even if you are, they can still be heavy going. GT Omega's rigs are usually on the less difficult side. It's one reason I've got a soft spot for them, but you'll still need to set aside a good few hours to assemble. The prize you win for enduring this is a pretty rock solid cockpit that will give you precision sim racing. And so, with cup of tea by my side, I'll set to it. After an hour of building, this is where I'm at. The base frame is built up and the pedal tray is affixed. Almost all profile rigs are sewn together by T-nuts. These are what all the bolts screw into and you have to place them where they're needed by hand. You can either slot them in at the end of the aluminium beams and slide them along, or better yet, you can feed them in spring side first, like this. For God's sake. Feed them in spring side like this. Then use an Allen key to swivel them into place. This is a technique you need to learn. It saves you lots of time and effort, so remember you can do this. Anyway, carrying on. Half an hour later and the upright posts are in, and it's at this point that I'll start to turn my attention to the seat. The one I've got here is the newest seat in GT Omega's range, the RS12 in carbon black. It looks absolutely brilliant, there's no denying that. Mounting this seat is going to be one of the fiddlier parts of the assembly, so just brace yourself for this part. It can be difficult to line everything up with a big hefty chair in the mix. With the seat fitted, next on the list is the wheel deck. The Prime Lite uses a full crossbar to bridge the two upright posts with the wheel plate mounted on top of it. The plate consists of thick steel with 4 M8 size bolts fixing it to the crossbar and 4 more to keep it anchored in whatever tilt position you set. Time to get my Fanatec DD1 wheel and Husingveld sprint pedals fixed up. Bolting the Prime Lite's top plate to the wheelbase and then mounting that top plate to the receiver on the rig itself is a simple job. There's a fair bit of tilt there and all. This part was nice and straightforward, no complaints from me, and seems really solid with all the bolts nipped up nice and tight. Mounting the pedals though is where the Prime Lite suddenly ties its own shoelaces together. Regardless of what pedals you're using, whilst you have a lot of range to move the pedals closer or further away, you are heavily restricted when it comes to left and right placement. I'm not a fan of this pedal deck design, not on a rig like this. When the original Prime came out in 2021, I and others pointed out how this design was a bit problematic. GT Omega responded and updated it with a brand new profile base tray that patched up the Prime's main weak spot, supplying it with every Prime sold going forward and fixing the error once and for all. I thought I'd seen the last of this pedal tray on any of GT Omega's profile rigs, so when I saw the pictures of a Prime Lite and discovered it had returned, I couldn't help but softly sigh. The pedal tray itself is reasonably strong. They've added more bracing to it than the original Prime had, and is pretty sturdy provided you are using pedals that have a base plate to spread the load. As you can see here, whilst there is a trace amount of bending in the tray when I stand on the brakes, I can't say it affects my driving, and I've been totally happy to race with it. It's strong enough for everyone that's operating around this budget. Unfortunately, it's the mounting hole pattern that compromises what's happening around the pedal area. The tray design itself doesn't need to worry about front to back adjustability. You can bring the whole thing closer or further away anyway. All it needs to do is provide lots of positioning range side to side, and it doesn't do that. I would like my sprint pedals to be slightly offset to the left, but I can't do it because the standard hole placement won't allow it, not without drilling my own holes where I want them to be. It does slightly baffle me how the lessons from the original Prime seemingly weren't learned here. Had a different hole design pattern being used, it wouldn't have cost a penny more to manufacture and would have sealed this as an all-round winner for the price. But because of this, the Prime Lite has that weakness. You can fit a Prime pedal plate to resolve this, it is compatible and it will give you not only full strength but also unlimited side to side range, but that's an extra 120 quid to put right something that didn't need to be wrong. With the seat, wheel and pedals bolted in, I adjust the position of things to as close as possible to my ideal, whilst making sure I can still lean over and give the dog a fuss in between corners. Things are pretty much there. I'll wheel the rig from the living room into the office and wire it all in. GT Omega includes some cable ties and slotted cable management clips. A small but meaningful bonus considering some places charge £1 each for these cable management clips. With the Prime Lite they include 10 of them, enough to help route cables around neatly, relatively speaking. Time to finally drive. Before this I've been racing on the full Prime for over a year and it's been perfect. If there was any proper, real performance compromise in switching to the Prime Lite, I would not only feel it immediately, but it would show in my results. No familiarization sessions, no adjustment grace period, just go for it and see what's missing. If I was to go from my DD1 to a CSL DD, I would definitely tell. If I was to go from my Husingveld Sprints to CSL pedals, I would definitely tell. I switched from the Prime to the Prime Lite and, in terms of driving performance, I couldn't really tell. It's really very good at just being strong, and for lots of people, that's the mission entire. I have not had that feeling of missing the full Prime and wanting to switch it back in yet, at all. However, I'm measuring this by my senses and perception alone, and whilst that is the only metric that really matters when it comes down to it, I'm well aware that you're going to want to see how the Prime Lite handles high forces anyway. So for that I've got this handy indicator tomato, which I've taped to the upright rig section in order to magnify and visibly show any flex, vibration and wobble under strain. As you can see, it actually does pretty well. When it comes to the seating, my initial impression of the RS12 seat is, looks great, but it's a bit firm for me. The back is fine, but the base is pretty rock hard. My previous seat, the RS9, is much more comfortable to sit in for me. I sat in that for 12 hours straight doing a solo endurance race. I couldn't imagine sitting in the RS12 for more than 3. Again, a bit of personal preference and everyone's derriere is a bit different, but for me the RS9 is best. You get a shifter mount included in the kit. That's a nice bonus because not all rigs in this class give it you for free. That'll cost you extra on a Track Racer TR80 Lite and a SimLab GT1 Evo, for example. I don't use a shifter, but I do have a lot of tea and biscuits, and just look at how well it stands up to that. Seriously though, it's pretty strong and sturdy. You shouldn't have any complaints here. With a Prime Lite, you'd be best advised to get a standalone monitor mount which is physically separated from the rig itself to reduce any transmission of force feedback. This one's a Prime single monitor stand but with a shortened cross beam to reduce the width so I can have the rig snugly up against the wall. Profile is handy for mixing and matching like this, so if you're short of inspiration you can see how I've done mine. If you really want integrated monitor mounts that fix to the rig itself, then the full Prime will be your best bet. This is how my Prime looks with an integrated triple mount. So let's sum things up to conclude. For a profile rig, it's easy enough to build with no unnecessarily complicated gimmicks. They give you plenty of spare nuts and bolts. The instructions are straightforward, and most importantly, it's clear when you're building it that it's going to be solid, and it is. It's a shame the pedal tray design throws things off a little bit, but as an entire unit it makes good on its price, and for the vast majority of people this will be all you need to get seriously sim racing. It's one of the lowest priced rigs in its class, and during my time with it, it has proved it's strong enough to be a real contender that I'll be happy enough to recommend because I've been happy using it. But more importantly, I'm really confident that you won't be disappointed with it, provided you've taken the pros and cons I've mentioned on board. I try not to be biased, but I do like GT Omega because they don't pretend to be the second coming, they just sit at the cheaper end and keep things simple in order to do that. There are better, stronger, flashier rigs out there, but they're also a lot more expensive. If I was to build a sim rig with the best performance possible per pound spent, I reckon the Prime Lite would be the chassis I'd go for. I hope this has been informative and you've had a good look at the Prime Lite, but if you've got any questions at all, then just comment below and I'll try to answer everyone. Don't forget to use code DannyLee to cut 5% off the purchase price over at GT Omega, and cheers again!